Yesterday's prophecies for today's world.
But greater is he who is in you than he who is in this world. The Holy Spirit dwells in every believer, and he is in you, and you need not be afraid.
And now, Hal Lindsey's Bible study of the book of John.
When we come to John chapter 4, you must not divorce this from its relationship to John chapter 3. We went through the chapter, and it was based around Jesus speaking to one of the leaders of the Jews, a member of the Sanhedrin. And what were some of the most startling facts that Jesus revealed in his conversation with Nicodemus that would really astonish Jews? Can you think of one? Yeah, born again. You had to be born again spiritually. Second? Simple, yeah. That's not the point that I'm looking for. What's that? There you are. That the Messiah that would come, the Old Testament predicted, would come not just for Israel, but to bring forgiveness and salvation to the whole world, not just for Israel. And that was a bombshell that he unleashed when he said that to Nicodemus. Even his disciples hadn't grasped that, and they won't for quite some time. But that was one of the big points that Jesus made in John chapter 3. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God didn't send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world through him might be saved. So he wasn't the Messiah they were looking for, but he is the Messiah they should have been looking for. Now we come to John chapter 4, which is another one of my particular favorites. And in John chapter 4, he illustrates in the most dramatic way his point that he came to save all people. And he picks people that the Jews hated. They had such prejudice against the Samaritans, they wouldn't speak to them. They believed that they were unsavable. And they had such an arrogance about them that it's really interesting. It was these people that Jesus chose to illustrate what he had just taught in John chapter 3. Now, not only in this chapter does he pick a Samaritan, but he just blows Jewish prejudices and traditions apart when, as a religious teacher, a rabbi, he speaks to a woman he doesn't know in public. That just wasn't done. It's not supposed to be done today in Israel. Judaism teaches that still. And not only does he pick a Samaritan woman he doesn't know to have a conversation with him, but he picks one that is of ill repute, as we will see. So what a dramatic illustration of what he just taught in John chapter 3. So let's read, beginning with John chapter 4, verse 1. When therefore the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. Now, it's very important to note that Jesus left here and did not go to Judea again except on very special, limited occasions. Why? Because once the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin found out that Jesus was becoming more popular than John the Baptist, they already had determined they were going to eliminate John the Baptist. But this made Jesus a marked man for assassination. They started planning how they could get rid of him. So Jesus, knowing all things, decided to go into Galilee, and this was the beginning of his big Galilean ministry. And the reason was not because he was afraid, but because he knew it wasn't the right time for him to be taken prisoner and executed. So he leaves that area, and then we read in verse 4, and he had to pass through Samaria. Now, that word in the original Greek means something of absolute necessity. It was imperative that he pass through Samaria. Well, you need to know something of the setting of that time. Like I said, there was a tremendous hatred and prejudice against the Samaritans. But Jews, if they were in Jerusalem, they would walk all the way down into the Jordan River Valley to pass by ancient Jericho, and then they would go down by the river all the way up to Galilee, and then they would cross back over into the Israel territory in Galilee. In other words, they would go way out of their way so they wouldn't pass through Samaria. So what does this mean when it says he had to go through Samaria? It was an imperative. Well, you see, that he didn't have to go through there because of geography. There was another way he could go. He didn't have to go through there because of a press on time. He had plenty of time. He didn't have to go through there because of some social need. He had to go through there because he had a divine appointment. And you have to pick this up right away. Now, you remember questions that I told you when studying the Bible? You know, your best friends when you're studying the Bible is when, where, what, why, and so what? Well, let's look at the time of year, first of all. When? This will come out as we go through the context, but I will set it up for you. When was he going through this area? Well, in the course of his conversation with his disciples there in Samaria, he said, "Do you not say that it is yet 4 months until harvest?" Well, agriculturally, the dates in Israel are very consistent. They plant a certain month, they harvest a certain month. And the month they harvested was September. So you count back 4 months, and it was May. And May in Israel, and I've been there many times in May, is very warm. And so this was the time of year that he was there. Remember that. Another thing, what time of day was it? Well, it says here it was the 6th hour. The day began to be counted from 6 a.m., and so it would have been noon. That's when he takes his seat at the well in that area. The setting. Jesus sent his disciples away deliberately, as we'll see. He sent them to Shlomo's hamburger joint to get hamburgers. Why? Well, you'll see. What did the disciples secretly say to each other when they came back and saw him talking to a woman? They would have absolutely been in the way. They would have interrupted him. They would have said, "Why are you talking to a Samaritan and a woman?" They would have, they were tainted with all the prejudices of the Jews. So he just got them out of the way. Go get some falafels. So it says he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son. Now, I have been to this well that he goes to many times. You can't go there now. This is Sychar, or Shechem. You know what that is today? Nablus. Heard of Nablus? It's a Palestinian stronghold for terrorists. And somehow that's always, for centuries, it's been a hostile place to Jews. Even then, you see, Samaritans were half-breeds. The Samaritans are a people who were a remnant that managed to return to the northern part of Israel after they had been defeated and destroyed as the northern nation, and they were taken captive by the Assyrians. And that was back in 720 BC. So they were scattered all over. But some of them, after they had, intermarried and so forth, they made them intermarry, actually, with various peoples where they scattered them. Some of them managed to get back to Israel. And so, they were a mixed race, but they still had Jewish, Israelite blood in them. And so, when they came back to Israel, they settled in the place that became known as Samaria. So, anyway, there was this great hostility. Most of the hostility was from the Jew toward the Samaritans. I think the Samaritans would have been glad to have fellowship with the Jews, but they just developed this tremendous prejudice against them. So I want to set the geographical scene for you. The place then, Sychar was the name of the little town there in Jesus' day. It was on Mount Gerizim. Now, Gerizim there are two mountain ranges, actually, in this area that run almost east and west. And in the middle of these two mountains is the valley. And back in Joshua's day, when they first invaded and took over this area, God did a very strange thing. He had the priests, under Joshua, he had the priests have the people march in the valley between these two mountains. And he had some priests on Mount Gerizim pronounce blessings on the people, and on the southern range, Mount Ebal, he had priests pronounce curses on them, so that they were given a chance to see what they could receive from the Lord. If they trusted him, they would get the blessings pronounced from Mount Gerizim. If they didn't trust him, then the curses pronounced from Mount Ebal would fall on them. Strange, isn't it? But that was the history of this place. Now, the Samaritans wisely chose to live on Mount Gerizim. And they had this little town built on the slope of Mount Gerizim. And it was up above, if you went up this little mountain, it was up above so that you looked down on the valley and the well that Jacob had given his son Joseph. And so this was named the Well of Jacob. And it was a very, in the Middle East, wells are really a treasure, especially wells that are from ancient times that were given to God's the forefathers of Israel, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, wells that were given by God to them. And these became not only treasured, but revered. So wells in that day were a very special thing to all the people. And of course, in a desert land, wells are special anyway. But they just didn't have some dry, desolate desert around the well. They would always plant trees, and they would plant nice plants around the well. They would have stone benches that you could sit around the well. They made beautiful places out of them. And, of course, Jacob's well was one of the really treasured ones, and that's the way it was when Jesus got there. So they have these trees around, and you could look from the well up to the city where the woman came from. She lived in Sychar. So remember that. Now, it says, so Jesus came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, therefore, being weary from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. And it was about the 6th hour. All right, I want you to get a picture of what the original says here. This is saying that Jesus was exhausted. And what the original Greek is showing is that when he took a seat, he just kind of sprawled out because he was really exhausted. And so he would have thrown his legs out and everything. You know how you sit when you're really tired. You don't sit elegantly. You stretch out your legs to kind of get them limbered up. That's what he did. He was really tired. There came a woman of Samaria to draw water. And Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Do you realize this was an appointment Jesus had with her from eternity past? This is why he had to come through there. This is why he had to get there at a certain time and had to come through all of the prejudices and all of the hatred and all of the things that would keep him from going there. He had to get there. And in order to get there, and I've been up the roads coming from Judea and you've been through there, haven't you, son? You coming from Judea, you go around these mountain roads and they're just steeper and steeper, and you get around like that before you get to Nablus, which then was Sychar, and then you come down. But it's an exhaust. Just to drive the car up there puts a strain on it. I mean, they don't have Porsches over there, so the engines tug along, Yeah, I can just imagine Jesus walking in that heat. Probably they started out, before daylight. And so, they arrived there at just this time. And so, even though he's exhausted, he is there and he rises to the occasion. Now, I want you to learn from the master here. Because you're going to see how to witness to somebody about salvation by the master. I want you to grasp exactly how he went about this. This is wonderful. I've used these things prayerfully many times. All right. He says, there came a woman of Samaria to draw water. And Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Now, right away, this put him in the lower position of obligation. No Jew would ever have done that. So the woman is absolutely astonished. And he deliberately did this because he wanted to make her relax and be willing to talk to him. He wanted her to see that he wasn't the typical kind of a Jew, that he was someone that was, at the very least, a very interesting Jew. And so when he says, give me a drink, it blew that woman's mind. And it took her mind off of why she had come in the heat of the day to draw water. Why did she? Well, right away, we know something about her. Because the decent women all came early in the morning to draw water. And late in the evening, before dark. So here's this one comes out in the heat of the day. Well, right away, you know, she is a woman that just doesn't want to be jeered at. And Susie, you see Susie coming, and they'll go all through all the gossip about her, you see. Because she was a woman who had fallen into sin. As if they had. It's really funny how we can condemn somebody else when in God's sight, he sees plenty on us. So anyway, Jesus, he's just busted everything up here. The woman replied, and at verse 8 it says, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Well, he's explaining here why he could talk to her. As I said, he sent them off to Shlomo's. And he just did that to get them out of the way. So anyway, that explanation sets that. And it says in verse 9, the Samaritan woman therefore said to him, how is it that you being a Jew, and by the way, the Greek language has a way of tracing the mood and things of somebody speaking. This woman probably had a smile on her face when she said this. And she was kind of mocking. And this was her chance to really kind of rub it in about how they were treated by the average Jew. So kind of jokingly and smiling, she says, how is it that you being a Jew ask me for a drink, since I'm a Samaritan woman? And then it explains, for the Jews had no dealings with Samaritans. Now, Jesus immediately turns the conversation and begins to lift the thought. So why did she come there? She came there with basically one thing on her mind, to get water. And she was thirsty. It was a necessity. So that's what was on her mind. So Jesus begins there. But I want you to see what he does here. This is a master of evangelism. And so he throws out a statement that declares the two most important facts you'll ever need to know. Fact number one, well, let's read it. See if you can pull it out. In verse 10 it says, Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Now, right away, there are three things established in this verse. First of all, if you knew the gift of God, we need to know what the gift of God is. Secondly, and who it is who gives it. So right away, he's taken a position of acceptance to this woman, I'm sure that was rare. He is not in any way condemning her. She kind of jokingly dealt with him. And by the way, when she addressed him, she didn't use any of the courtesy titles that you would give anyone. She didn't say, sir. She just started right in and spoke to him. So there was no respect given to him. But he just ignores that. And he comes right back at her and he says, oh, if you only knew the gift of God and who it is who's talking to you. Oh, my Lord. Who is he? Then you would have asked him, and he would have given. Notice the emphasis on give. With no price. He would have given you living water. Now he's lifted what's on her mind. He's pushing it to a higher level. That there's something higher, more important, and something she needs much more than just the water she came to get from the well. What a master.
Join us next week for the continuation of Hal Lindsey's Bible study of the book of John.
But when you really get a grip on the fact that Jesus so saves you, when you simply admit your sins and receive the gift of pardon, that you are already in heaven as far as he's concerned. As I prepared for this week's program, I was again struck by the speed with which events are moving into the scenario the prophets predicted for the end times. I believe we're there. People on the street are talking about what all of these things mean. Folks that wouldn't darken the door of a church or pick up a Bible are now very curious. This may be our greatest opportunity, maybe even our last opportunity, to share the gospel of Jesus Christ before we're silenced by political correctness. The message that God has given me is more important now than it's ever been, for the church and for the nation. That's why I'm asking you to help me to expand our reach.
You can find more of Hal Lindsey at his website, www.hallindsey.com. There you can access our video and article archives. Visit our online store for Hal Lindsey CDs, books, and other specialty items. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.